A weathered house stands in the heart of Atlanta, its wooden frame creaking under the weight of time and hardship. The paint is chipped, the front steps uneven, and the windows barely hold back the cold air seeping through the cracks. It is not much, but for Michael Johnson, it is home. Michael, a 12-year-old black boy, has spent his life navigating the difficulties of being raised in a predominantly white adoptive family. Robert and Linda Johnson took him in when he was just a baby, raising him alongside their biological daughter, Sophia. Their love has never been in question, but love alone cannot shield them from the struggles of the real world. The Johnsons have always lived paycheck to paycheck, barely making ends meet. Robert, once a construction worker, has been out of steady work for months. Linda works long shifts as a waitress at a small diner, bringing home just enough to keep food on the table. But bills stack up faster than they can pay them, and the weight of their situation grows heavier by the day. Sophia, Michael's younger sister, clings to dreams of a better future. She spends her days sketching designs for the dresses she hopes to create one day, filling her notebooks with vibrant colors and endless ideas. She talks about the future as if it is just within reach, but Michael knows the reality they live in. Dreams do not pay rent. The final blow comes when their landlord arrives with an eviction notice. They have 2 weeks to come up with the money, or they will lose the only home they have ever known. Linda holds back tears while Robert stands in silent frustration, his pride wounded by their helplessness. Michael watches from the corner of the room, his stomach twisting with a mixture of fear and determination. He cannot let this happen. He will not. "I can help," he says, stepping forward. Robert shakes his head before Michael can say another word. "Your job is school, son. You're not giving that up." Michael wants to argue, but he knows it will not change his father's mind. Education is the one thing Robert refuses to compromise on. "We'll figure something out," Robert insists, but the exhaustion in his voice betrays the truth. He does not know how. That night, Michael lies awake, staring at the ceiling. The weight of their situation presses down on him. He cannot sit by and watch his family lose everything. He cannot ignore the fear in Sophia's eyes or the quiet resignation in his mother's voice. So, he makes a decision. Before the sun rises, he slips out of the house, his breath visible in the cold morning air. The city stretches before him, vast and filled with possibilities. Somewhere in its maze of streets and towering buildings, there is work to be found. A way to help his family. Michael has never been one to break rules, but this is different. This is survival. As he steps onto the city bus, his heart pounds with a mix of excitement and fear. He does not know what awaits him, only that he cannot return home empty-handed. The bus rattles as it moves through the quiet streets, passing closed storefronts and empty sidewalks. The city is still waking up, and Michael wonders if this is a mistake, if he is in over his head. But then he thinks about Sophia, about his mother's tired eyes, and his father's quiet disappointment. He cannot fail them. The bus stops near the downtown district. Michael steps off, stuffing his hands into his thin jacket. He scans the streets, searching for a sign, for anything that might lead him to work. He walks past bakeries opening for the morning rush, past businessmen sipping coffee, past construction sites filled with workers who wouldn't even glance his way. Doubt creeps in, but he pushes forward. He takes one last glance at the rising sun, then faces forward. A new journey has begun. What would you do if your family was about to lose everything? Let's discuss. Where are you watching from, and what time is it? What would you do if your family was about to lose everything? Let's discuss. Michael's feet ache from walking. The city, once filled with promise, now feels vast and unwelcoming. He has spent the entire day searching for work, stopping at stores, restaurants, and gas stations, only to be met with the same response. He is too young. He has no experience. No one is willing to take a chance on a 12-year-old, no matter how determined he is. The sun has long since set, and the streets have grown quieter. A neon sign flickers above a small diner on the corner, its windows glowing with warm light. Michael considers stepping inside, if only to rest for a moment. But before he can take a step forward, a sudden noise shatters the silence. A loud screech, the roar of an engine. Michael turns just in time to see a black SUV speeding down the street, its tires skidding across the pavement. A second later, the sharp crack of gunfire echoes through the night. His heart slams against his ribs. Then, movement. A woman stumbles out of an alleyway clutching her leg. She's breathing heavily, pain etched across her face. A badge clipped to her belt gleams in the dim streetlight. Rachel Carter, CIA Chief. Michael doesn't have time to process the title. All he sees is the blood staining her pant leg, the way she struggles to move. She is in trouble. Before he can react, the SUV screeches to a halt a few yards away. The doors fly open. Armed men spill out onto the street, their movements sharp, practiced. They are not random criminals. They are here for her. Michael's body tenses. His breath comes fast and shallow. He has seen men like this on the news, in movies. Dangerous men. Men who do not leave witnesses. Rachel Carter presses herself against the alley wall, her fingers tightening around the gun in her grip. But she is injured, outnumbered. She won't stand a chance if they reach her. Michael glances at the diner. The door is open, just a crack, and the hum of conversation drifts through the air. He could run inside, pretend he saw nothing. He could slip away into the darkness and disappear before anyone notices him. But his feet don't move. They're coming for her, he realizes. One of the men gestures sharply toward Rachel. Another speaks into a radio, his voice low and urgent. Their steps quicken. They are closing in. Michael's heart pounds. He has no weapon, no way to fight. But he cannot just stand there. He cannot let them take her. His mind races through his options. Run, hide, fight. 3 choices. None of them good. His hands shake as he looks around for something, anything that could help. A discarded glass bottle near the alleyway catches his eye. It's not much, but it's all he has. Rachel tries to lift her gun, but her injury slows her down. The men are nearly upon her now. Michael knows that if he does nothing, she will be taken. His breath comes fast and sharp. His fingers curl into fists. He knows he is no hero. He knows he has no real chance against them. But deep inside, something stronger than fear takes hold. Michael picks up the bottle and grips it tightly. He knows he cannot fight them all, but maybe he can buy her just enough time to get away. Maybe, just maybe, he can make a difference. Rachel Carter locks eyes with him, her expression unreadable. Then, barely above a whisper, she mouths one word, "Run." Michael's breath catches, but instead of running, he makes his choice. What would you do in Michael's situation? Let's discuss. Michael does not think. He acts. Gunshots crack through the air as he races toward Rachel Carter. His pulse hammers in his ears, drowning out the chaos around him. The armed men shout orders, their heavy boots pounding against the pavement, but Michael ignores them. He grabs Rachel's arm and throws it over his shoulder, staggering slightly under her weight. "Come on," he gasps. "We have to go." Rachel does not argue. Her grip tightens around his shoulder as she forces herself to move. Every step sends pain lancing through her wounded leg, but she clenches her teeth and pushes forward. The men are closing in. Michael's lungs burn as they sprint down the street. The cold air stings his face, but he cannot slow down. He ducks into an alleyway, pulling Rachel with him, just as bullets ricochet off the brick wall behind them. Sparks fly. The sound makes his heart leap into his throat. "Faster!" Rachel hisses, her voice strained. Michael grits his teeth and pushes forward, weaving between trash cans and crates. The city blurs around him. His legs scream in protest, but he does not stop. He cannot. The men are still behind them, their voices sharp and angry. He hears the metallic click of another gun being loaded. "Left!" Rachel gasps. Michael obeys, taking a sharp turn into another alley. The space is narrow, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. He can hear the men cursing behind them, their footsteps growing louder. Up ahead, a chain-link fence blocks their path. Michael skids to a stop, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Panic grips his chest. There is no way out. Rachel's eyes dart to the side. A stack of wooden pallets leans against the brick wall. It is their only option. "Climb," she orders. Michael does not hesitate. He scrambles up the pallets, gripping the cold metal of the fence. His fingers fumble for a foothold, his body aching from exertion. Rachel follows, slower, her wounded leg making it nearly impossible. The men reach the alley just as Michael swings his legs over the top and drops to the other side. Rachel is still struggling. The men raise their guns. Michael's heart slams against his ribs. He grabs the bottom of her jacket and pulls. With a sharp cry, she tumbles over the top, landing hard beside him. They do not stop. Michael pulls her to her feet and keeps running. He does not know where he is going. He only knows he has to get her somewhere safe. The streets blur past them as they weave through dark alleys and side streets. The shouts behind them grow distant, fading into the night. The men are still searching, but for now they have escaped. Finally, Michael sees it. His house. His chest heaves as he half carries Rachel up the worn wooden steps. The door creaks open. Inside, the small living room is dark, silent. His parents and sister are asleep. Michael lowers Rachel onto the floor, his arms shaking. She winces but does not make a sound. He presses a finger to his lips. "Stay quiet," he whispers. Rachel nods, her breathing uneven. Blood seeps through the fabric of her pants, pooling onto the worn floorboards. Michael exhales sharply, his mind racing. He knows bringing her here is dangerous. He knows if his parents wake up, there will be questions he cannot answer. But he also knows one thing for certain. He could not leave her behind. Would you take a stranger into your home, knowing the risks? Let's discuss. Michael wakes to the blaring sound of sirens. His heart jumps into his throat as red and blue lights flood through the small windows, painting the walls in flashing streaks. He barely has time to process what is happening before the heavy thud of boots shakes the front porch. Then, a deafening voice booms through a megaphone. "Come out with your hands where we can see them." Michael jolts upright. His entire body goes rigid. For a second, he thinks he is still dreaming. But then, he hears his mother's panicked voice. "What's going on?" Linda Johnson rushes into the living room, her eyes wide with confusion. She barely has time to react before the front door bursts open. Uniformed officers flood inside, their guns drawn. The sight is overwhelming. Shouting voices, flashing lights, hands grabbing at him before he can even move. "Don't move! Hands up!" An officer barks. Michael's breath catches in his throat. He raises his hands instinctively, his body frozen in fear. His mother screams as two officers seize him, yanking him away from the couch. "Wait! Stop! He's just a kid!" Linda cries, grabbing at one of the officers. Another officer holds her back, his expression unreadable. Michael is shoved forward, his legs barely keeping up with the force pulling him. He stumbles onto the porch, where even more officers wait, their faces hard and cold. His father stands nearby, hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight with rage and confusion. Sophia watches from the doorway, her small frame trembling. "Please." "What's happening?" Linda pleads. "He hasn't done anything wrong." Michael's chest tightens. He wants to say something, to defend himself, but his voice feels trapped. The officer gripping his arm tightens his hold. Then Rachel Carter steps forward. Still weak, she leans against the door frame, her face pale from blood loss. Her voice is hoarse, but firm. "He saved me." The officers do not acknowledge her. "He didn't do anything wrong," she insists, her eyes flashing with urgency. "You're making a mistake." But the officers do not loosen their grip. To them, Michael is not a hero. He is a suspect. A 12-year-old boy in the wrong place at the wrong time. Michael glances around, his mind racing. The neighbors have gathered on their porches, watching in stunned silence. He can feel their stares burning into him, their expressions unreadable. Some whisper among themselves. Others shake their heads. One of the officers pulls out a pair of handcuffs. "No, wait." Rachel tries to step forward, but she stumbles. "Listen to me. The officer closest to her lifts a hand. "Ma'am, please step back. You need medical attention." Rachel's hands curl into fists at her sides. He doesn't deserve this. Michael feels the cold metal snap around his wrists. Panic surges through him as the cuffs tighten, too big for his small wrists, but still suffocating. Tears burn behind his eyes, but he refuses to let them fall. He does not understand how everything went so wrong. He only wanted to help. He only wanted to do the right thing. Yet, here he is, a hero turned suspect. Why do some people assume the worst before knowing the truth? Let's talk about it. Michael sits handcuffed in the cold metal chair, his wrists aching from the tight grip of the cuffs. The interrogation room is small and sterile, its white walls bare except for a security camera blinking in the corner. A dull, fluorescent light hums above him, casting harsh shadows across the scratched surface of the metal table in front of him. His heart pounds. His breath is uneven. He does not belong here. The door creaks open, and two officers step inside. One is older, with sharp eyes and a hardened expression. The other is younger, but his face holds the same suspicion. The older officer carries a thick manila folder, his fingers gripping it tightly. Without a word, he slams the file onto the table. "Tell us who you work for." Michael flinches. His eyes dart from the folder to the officer's face. His stomach twists. "Work for," he echoes, barely able to find his voice. I don't work for anyone." The younger officer crosses his arms. "Don't play dumb, kid. You were caught harboring a high-profile CIA agent. You knew exactly what you were doing." Michael shakes his head, panic rising in his chest. "No, I was just trying to help. She was hurt. The older officer cuts him off. "Enough." He slides the file toward Michael and flips it open. Inside are grainy surveillance photos, shots of him running through the alley with Rachel Carter, of him helping her into his house. The sight of them sends a chill down his spine. They had been watching him. Michael swallows hard. He wants to explain, to make them see the truth, but the weight of their stares tells him it would not matter. They have already decided who he is. The younger officer leans forward. "So, You expect us to believe you just happened to be there, that you had nothing to do with the attack. Michael's hands curl into fists. Frustration and fear tangle inside him. Yes, I was looking for work. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know any of this. The officers exchange a glance, unconvinced. Then, the door bursts open. Rachel Carter strides in, her presence filling the room with undeniable authority. She is still pale from blood loss, but her posture is strong, her sharp eyes burning with anger. "Uncuff him," she orders, her voice cold and commanding. The room falls into silence. The older officer hesitates. "Ma'am, this boy saved my life." Rachel's voice slices through the air. "And you have him sitting here like a criminal." The younger officer clears his throat. "We were just following protocol." "I don't care about protocol." Rachel steps closer, her gaze locked onto them. "This boy risked everything to help me. He had no idea who I was, and yet he ran straight into danger. And your response is to interrogate him?" Michael stares at her, barely breathing. No one has ever defended him like this before. Rachel turns back to the officers. "I want those cuffs off, now." For a moment, neither officer moves. Then, with a reluctant sigh, the older one nods. The younger officer steps forward and unlocks the cuffs. Michael exhales sharply as they slip off his wrists. He rubs the sore skin, still stunned by how quickly everything shifted. Rachel looks at him, her expression softening. "You're coming with me, Michael. We have a lot to talk about." Michael swallows, his mind racing. He does not know what comes next, but one thing is clear. His life will never be the same again. Have you ever been judged unfairly? How did you prove them wrong? Let's discuss. Michael never expected to see his face on television, but there he was. Every major news station in Atlanta was covering the same story: the kid who saved the CIA chief. Headlines flashed across screens, newspapers printed his name, and reporters crowded outside his house, eager for a glimpse of him. The world now knew what he had done. At first, it felt unreal. Just days ago, he had been handcuffed, treated like a criminal. Now, people were calling him a hero. Neighbors who once ignored him now offered handshakes and congratulations. Strangers stopped him on the street, praising his bravery. It was overwhelming. Despite the attention, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that his journey was just beginning. Rachel Carter confirmed it the moment she pulled him aside. "They weren't just after me," she said, her voice firm. "The men who attacked me are part of something bigger, a secret organization tied to a government conspiracy. We've been tracking them for years." Michael frowned. "And now they know who I am?" Rachel sighed. "Unfortunately, yes." The realization sent a shiver down his spine. His actions had put him in the middle of something far more dangerous than he had imagined. But instead of fear, something else stirred inside him, a need to understand, a need to help. Rachel saw it in his eyes. "I need people I can trust," she said. "Your knowledge of the city's streets, your instincts. They're better than some agents I've trained." Michael blinked at her, unsure if he had heard correctly. "You think I have instincts?" She smiled. "I think you have something most people don't. You saw danger and acted, not for yourself, but to save someone else. That's rare." Michael had never considered himself special. He was just a kid trying to survive. But hearing Rachel say those words made him feel something he had never felt before. Seen. For the first time, someone believed in him. He thought about his life before all of this. The struggles, the nights spent worrying about his family, the feeling of being invisible. Now, he had a choice. He could walk away, let the CIA handle things, and try to go back to the way things were. Or he could step forward, use what he knew, and be a part of something bigger than himself. Rachel gave him space to decide. She didn't push him, didn't pressure him. Whatever you choose, you've already done more than most ever will, she told him. But if you want to help, there's a place for you. Michael sat with her words for a long time. He thought about his family, about the danger this would bring, but he also thought about what it meant to have a purpose, to fight for something that mattered. As the sun set over Atlanta, Michael stood at a crossroads. The city stretched out before him, full of unanswered questions and new possibilities. He had always been good at finding his way through the streets, but this time, the path ahead was one only he could choose. Did he walk away, or did he step into the unknown? Do you think Michael should help the CIA or stay out of danger? Let's talk about it. Michael never thought his life would change so drastically in just a few days. One moment, he was searching for a job to help his struggling family. The next, he was being hailed as a hero. The attention was overwhelming, but Rachel Carter made sure he and his family were taken care of. For the first time in years, they no longer had to worry about eviction notices or empty kitchen cabinets. Through quiet connections, Rachel arranged for them to move into a new home, one with sturdy walls, working heat, and enough space for all of them to breathe. The house felt like a fresh start, but Michael knew the real change was happening inside him. He sat on the steps of the new house, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. His mother and father were inside, still in disbelief that things had finally turned around. Sophia ran from room to room, marveling at the space, but Michael remained quiet, lost in thought. Rachel joined him, standing at the bottom of the steps. "You're not celebrating," she observed. Michael shrugged. "It's not over." Rachel studied him for a moment before nodding. "Number, it's not." The organization that had targeted her was still out there, moving in the shadows. They had lost this battle, but Michael knew they were far from gone. He had seen how dangerous they were, how relentless. And now they knew who he was. Rachel reached into her pocket and pulled out a sleek, black phone. She held it out to him. "If you ever see something strange, call me." Michael hesitated before taking it. The weight of it felt heavier than it should have been. "You think they'll come back?" "I think people like them don't just disappear," Rachel said. "And I think you have instincts that could help keep people safe." Michael turned the phone over in his hands. It was untraceable, meant for emergencies only, a lifeline to a world he never expected to be part of. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. Rachel took a step back. "This is your choice, Michael. I'm not asking you to become something you're not. I just want you to be prepared." He looked up at her, searching her face for some kind of answer. But Rachel was letting him decide. No pressure, no expectations. Just a quiet understanding between them. He slipped the phone into his pocket. "Thanks." Rachel gave him a small nod. "Take care of your family, and take care of yourself." She turned and walked toward the waiting black SUV at the curb. Michael watched her go, something telling him this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. As the car disappeared down the road, he exhaled slowly. The city stretched out before him full of unanswered questions and hidden dangers. His family was safe. But for how long? Michael had always been good at navigating the streets, finding his way through the chaos. But now, he wasn't just surviving. Now he had a reason to keep moving forward. Would you ever want to help in an investigation? Let's talk in the comments.